Welcome to the first session of the day at the Data Geek Saturday. You may have heard it while we were doing some brief introductions before the session. I come from Belgium, which means that it's currently 3:15 in the afternoon. It is a rainy afternoon, so it is with great pleasure that I am stuck inside to share the things that I've learned in the past with you, and hopefully that you can pick up something as well. My name is Benni de Jagere, and as I mentioned, I come from Belgium and I work for a company called Auditing. It's a consulting company, so I do lots of different customers, lots of different assignments, lots of different projects on a daily basis. But lately, it's been mostly doing way too many Teams meetings, sending way too many emails, calling too much throughout the day, etc., and writing documents for some odd reason. The other things that you can maybe sometimes find me doing is I also help out with a user group out here in Belgium called datamines.be. We do similar things. We put on fun community events to make sure that our people in the community can meet up with each other, to make sure that they can learn things, that they can learn from each other, all while just having fun and laughing and learning while doing so. If you want to find me on any of these social channels, I've got my handles put up right there as well. And that's it. Let's get started with the session. One thing before going in there, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat window. I've got a second screen open. I'm trying to keep an eye on the chat window as well. If it's a question that I think is relevant for what I'm discussing at that point, I'll take it in at that exact point. If I think it's going to derail it a bit, I'll tell you, and then I'll keep it for the end because I do have some time left over for Q&A as well. Let me start off by welcoming you. Probably most of you are accidental tenant administrators, maybe tenant administrators. Maybe you're not doing any tenant administration at this point. Why am I saying accidental tenant admins? Is that especially here in Belgium, I've not seen that many dedicated resources. So people that fill their day with just solely managing Power BI. There is always something else that they do. Maybe they're even developing reports themselves. Maybe they're developing data sets. Maybe they are also managing other BI tools. Maybe they are SQL Server admins. There's many different reasons why there is not a dedicated resource, especially in those smaller and medium businesses. In the larger businesses, you'll probably start seeing it a bit more, but it's not that common, as I mentioned, especially here in Belgium. And most of the times, if there are dedicated resources, then an overlap with Microsoft 365 or Office 365 is even more rare that I've seen. If there are those resources that do this kind of tenant admin stuff, it's usually someone from the SharePoint side, someone from the identity management side that does Microsoft 365, and then you got the BI people doing the other side. Many of the admins that I've encountered out in the wild, they're often appointed by association. Like, hey, you're the SQL person, you're doing SQL queries, or you're the one doing reporting services reports for us. So yeah, you're now the admin. Have fun, enjoy. On its own, that's a really good thing because it does allow those people to also focus on fun and interesting things on top of their work that they're already doing. But maybe that's not the necessarily things that they've been properly trained for, or that they have the necessary skills and competence for. Maybe they don't even have a faint idea about what Power BI actually is. Meaning that it is hard to actually get going from the start at an optimal pace. Especially Power BI is in the meantime 6 years old. Especially when I go back a few years, it was hard and mostly based on trial and error to get a successful view of how to manage and how to administrate your tenant. Luckily, as the years gone by and as Microsoft's been releasing lots of excellent content as well, the maturity has risen, and it is becoming more manageable. It is actually becoming a better experience to start administrating that tenant. The thing is, and I'm grossly understating here, is that Power BI is a moving target. Moving target, meaning we get updates all the time. We get desktop updates, we get API updates, we get service updates, we get reporting services, paginated reports updates, there's every single week there's probably an update happening. Even alone, if you're trying to read along with the Power BI blog from the Power BI product team, especially the last few weeks for some odd reason, 2 blogs a day has not been the exception. which is very hard to keep up with if you're actually doing a day job as well. And it makes it hard. The thing is as well is that what I've heard in the past is that, yeah, well, it's just Power BI. It's a data visualization tool. How hard can it be? And then luckily, it's really likely that you've seen it, is this little diagram by Melissa Coates from Coates Data Strategy, where she's outlined, okay, well, this is at this point in January 4th in 2021, so more than, well, it's close to 8 months ago. That was the situation at the time. And it means that you have to print this out on at least an A3 paper, on a really big paper. And that's usually when I hear the argument saying, oh, Power BI is just a data viz tool, that's usually what I pull out and say, well, here's this. So it is not just a data viz tool. There is plenty of things to keep an eye on, which makes it hard. Where do you start? What are the key things to keep in mind? And bear with me, it is largely dependent on what your organization is doing, or what your customer is doing, or what you already have some skills in or not. But it is, yeah, it's easy to lose control and lose oversight in this. And hopefully, well, we can make it a bit better so you can take something home with you as well. The thing is that quite often, tenant admins that I've seen out in the wild as well, they've got this classic admin experience. They just say no to everything. Hey, can I have this tenant setting enabled because I need to export something to a specific format, or I need to, I need to have a specific custom visual. Odds are likely that you'll get a response saying, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And the thing is that bothers me as well, because I also feel that a tenant admin is an important cog in the wheel for empowering your users, for stimulating the data usage, for stimulating the maturity of how people are working with their data and their reports in the organization. There's lots of work, there's lots of things happening around data culture lately, especially by people like Matthew Roach, Melissa Coates again. There are lots of cool things happening, especially also with the Power BI product teams as well, working on it. And I do feel that tenant admin is a chain in this link that cannot miss, because they are usually at the forefront. They are usually what stands between the big, mighty ivory tower of control and those users trying to do their daily job, trying to get those insights. Meaning that if they just go about and start restricting things, start disabling features, just say no all the time, probably that means that people are going to find their way around it. They're going to find loopholes. They're going to find back alleys to try and do their things their own. Maybe they'll even start breaking out access databases again. Who knows? If it gets their work done, if they can get their insights, then that's good for them. The thing is that when we're working with a tool as powerful as Power BI, we want to have users collaborating with each other. We want those people to work together. We want people to share their successes and have other people benefit from those successes. Maybe even have other people seeing those successes and think, well, hey, I actually want that for myself as well. So it is about stimulating everything that we can do inside of the organization. The thing is, I mentioned that it's an important link in the chain, but a tenant admin cannot do it alone. It is about I'm not going into data culture as a whole topic, but it is about executive sponsorship. It is about making sure that you have a community, making sure that you have people with expertise that are willing to share. It is not easy, but a tenant admin is a really important cog in that chain. So what does a tenant admin actually do? And they do lots of things. They do data management as well. Potentially they're the ones administering SQL Server databases, Oracle databases. Maybe they're even the ones responsible for managing this dark file share server with 10,000 Excels on it. Who knows? They're also usually the ones handling data governance. Who has access to what? Who can access what? Who can do what? Same thing with security and compliance. How are we managing access? Are we allowing people to log in from anywhere? It is lots of the times you always see that coming back to a tenant admin. But most importantly, a tenant admin is usually also the one handling parts of change management. For instance, what if Power BI, what if the product team decides to roll out a breaking feature that is going to change the way that people work with it? What if they decide to change the service layout again? That requires your end users, that requires the tenant admins and the people managing and stimulating the tool to actually go ahead and help those end users find a new way of working. They help with product integrations. Well, as I mentioned, SQL servers, oracles, maybe even do driver help out with drivers to make sure that data connectivity can happen. So they do lots of things. But most importantly, they also just do general problem solving. I've seen lots of instances. I've seen lots of cases where they're also sort of the help desk, like the almighty guru of DAX and Power Query and data modeling, where they're just the person that they go to ask questions. But in my opinion, most importantly, they do magic. It's quite simple. Tenant admins are underappreciated, I feel. They do really good jobs, and they should be stimulated more. They should be appreciated more. Maybe it's just me talking, but it's I do feel that they do an exceptional good job of this. The thing is, I hope I set the scene on why tenant admins are there, why tenant admins are important. So what are the things that, okay, let's say you are a tenant admin, what are some of the things that you can get started with to make sure that you're actually doing a good job, to make sure that you've got an eye on how things are working? The most important thing is, well, service health. Is the Power BI service up and running? Is identity management up and running? Is blob storage running? Those kinds of things. There are a few sites, a few websites that are very handy to bookmark. And I've already shared the link to the slide deck in the chat window as well. The slide deck has links to all of the things that I'm mentioning, so you can easily click through to all the websites that I've included in there. The most important one for me is Power BI support. It doesn't always necessarily reflect the situation at that current time. There is some delay, but it does allow you, it does give you an overview of, okay, how is the service health? Is there some kind of degradation? Is there something that we need to know, or is there a downright outage? The last outages that I've seen with Power BI itself have most of the time been because of the fact that there is identity management, so the Azure Active Directory that's gone faulty, etc. But I should think, but I've not seen actually, I've not seen any actual big gaps pointing towards an outage by Power BI itself. They are dependent on other Azure services, so it is something that they also have to be dependent on. But usually for Power BI specifically, we can get that through the service health from Power BI support window. As I mentioned, they are dependent on lots and lots of different other Azure stacks, other Azure services as well. The Azure Status website, or the Azure Status website, is something that gives you a quick and easy overview, saying, okay, I have got resources running in the Americas, I've got resources running in Europe, maybe even Middle East and Africa. I have SQL databases running, I have logic apps running. What's the status on this? Just make sure that you have something that as soon as you hear something saying this isn't working, I try to keep myself the reflex to just quickly go ahead and check, okay, do I have something on both of these websites? Is there something popping up for a service degradation? Because that would allow me to exclude the fact that I don't need to go looking internally if there is anything working there. Same thing with the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. It just bundles all the specific messages that you, specific notifications that you need to be getting for your tenant, for your Microsoft 365 tenant. It gives you the overviews of what do you have, what types of, is it a, and just purely an informational point, is it a service degradation, is it an outage, what specific component is it, when has it started, is it resolved, is it not resolved, what was the resolution, is it a workaround, those types of information for you. Really handy. Just some things that I do like to keep an eye on as well. The links are included, so to keep sake of time, I'm not going to visit those websites itself. It is as soon as you go to the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. That's the trickiest one to find. You just have to make sure that you go to the service health part, and that's it. And then you can find the service health center. The thing is, for me personally, it is about making sure that you can answer those questions on what's happened, who's done something, who did potentially something that we may need to log, and that is for me the Power BI activity log, or it is quite simple. It is just the flight recorder log. It is what stores all the information on who has done what timestamp, what specifically have they done, and what resource, what artifact have they actually been using. So the Power BI activity log has been introduced in December 2019, and it is the alternative to the Office 365 audit log. And it stores data for up to 30 days. You can call data for up to 30 days. The difference with the Office 365 audit log is that you can get up to 90 days from that specific API. The thing is, the main difference is that there are some changes, that there are some differences in what permissions you require. Because specifically for the Power BI activity log, you only need resources, you only need permissions on the Power BI side. Either have a Power BI admin role, so just the Power BI admin role, or an Office 365 global admin. That will allow you to call those, that will allow you to access the Power BI activity log. The difference with the Office 365 audit log is that if you have those global admin privileges, you'll probably be able to access it too. But the other thing is, you could also do it with viewer permissions or contributor permissions on the Office 365 Security and Compliance Center. The thing is, that gives you access to all the components that exist inside of Office 365, which means identity management, which means licenses, which means information about SharePoint, about Teams, and it may not necessarily be something that every Office 365 admin is happy to give to you. Meaning, Power BI activity log just requires you to have permissions on the Power BI side, and usually is less of a discussion to get those permissions going. But in my opinion, it is the key to many questions. If tomorrow your CIO comes to you and says, okay, well, I need to know who has actually got reports up in published web, or who has given themselves a Power BI premium per user subscription, then that is something that the activity log will most likely be a very important tool to answer those questions. But because of the fact that you only have it for 30 days, you have to start recording it. You have to start capturing that data so you can go back in time if you need to have it. It is usually quite simple and quite easy to store it, because you can get it in CSV files, you can get it in JSON files, you can store it somewhere, you can load it to your own SQL server, whatever you have running. But it is important, it is crucial to get that data as soon as you can, just to be able to get back to that point in time if you actually need it. The thing is as well is, I'll quickly show you one of the things that I use. Way too many screens open, or did I close it? It's also possible, yeah. There we go. The way that I usually do it is by running PowerShell commandlets. You don't have to run PowerShell. You can do it with API calls. You can do it with logic apps. You can do it with Azure Functions. You can do it with pretty much anything that you want to do, whatever floats your boat. Why am I using PowerShell? Specifically because the clients that I first started doing with it, they requested PowerShell, so I just kept going with it. The thing is that it is quite straightforward to get started with this. It can be as easy as just making sure that I connect to my Power BI service account. Just make sure that I run the sequence, that I run this commandlet, making sure that I can actually go ahead then and start connecting to an account. That's it. Just connect to the account. It's now going to grab the credentials that I have, and then it should. Why did I close this up? It's still working naturally. The thing is that all I need to do to get that information out of there, it can be as easy as running this command. That's it. If you have those Power BI commandlets installed, it can be as easy as running this command, saying, give me the Power BI activity events from that date to that date, and return it to me in a JSON string or whatever. Why am I not using this? Why am I going the slightly more complex road? The thing is, I had some issues with running those Power BI commandlets, where I was lacking on a production environment on a server some DLL, and it wasn't really super clear which DLL it was, and Power BI support didn't find it also. So out of the 12 clients that have got this running, there's one that had issues, so I just went with the other solution that goes with this as well. But it can be as simple as executing that single line of code. What the rest of it does is, well, it gets the data. It means that I go ahead and call those APIs, and then start selecting the fields I need. Why am I selecting the fields I need? Well, it is the same reason why we don't do select star in SQL, for instance. If we're going to do a select star and tomorrow new fields are added, which is a very likely event to be happening, that will also start returning those fields. But if we have something that is very nitpicky about the metadata it's getting, then that will actually mean that that field is being fed into that thing as well, into that process as well, and potentially start failing. So my preference is, okay, well, just store that data right now, store that field to keep those processes running. Potentially, what I also could be doing is just storing the entire JSON file first, and then getting that data from there as well. And then that would mean that I would have all the data and just go ahead from that as well. And then dump that to a CSV file. And as I mentioned, as I've seen in the chat window as well, those files are already inside of a Git repo, inside of a Git link as well. I did have many different plans to start feeding different scripts in there, but I did have some issues with time and, well, honestly, motivation as well to start doing these things. What does it actually give me? What does it return me? Well, it returns me a CSV file, and that CSV file gives me the information about, okay, who has been doing what action has been run, and then who's the culprit that's actually doing this. Who's the culprit that's actually doing this? And spoiler alert, it has been me. This is an older file as well, but it returns you the information about who's been doing it, potentially what workspaces it is, and that is going to allow you to see, okay, what has happened? Who has given themselves trial licenses? Who's doing publish to web? Who's using custom visuals? Who has been accessing a certain report? Who's been accessing a certain workspace? It is the what has happened part of your questions that you can really start answering with this. So if there's anything you take away from this, is start getting that activity log as soon as possible, because the fact that you can go back in time will potentially be really interesting for you if you ever have those questions as well. The same thing with the artifact inventory. You can call it something else as well. It is just the fact that you have something there, you have an inventory of all the different things that you have. You have those artifacts. What do I mean with an artifact? It is a workspace, it is a report, a dashboard, it is an app, it is potentially the user that is linked to something, it is a data flow, it is a workbook, it is everything that you can find in your Power BI workspace. And most of those artifacts can actually be extracted through the APIs or PowerShell or Azure Functions or whatever you have running. The thing is that you don't actually have to run those PowerShell commands as well. You can also get them manually, which I'll get back to in a point as well. But at the end of the day, we want to try to automate as much as possible, so that leaves us more time to drink coffee throughout the day rather than clicking on things to run manually. The thing is, why is this information crucial? The activity log gives us a lot of that information as well. But that's just giving me an idea and a name. I want potentially to have more information about this as well. I want to have the information, okay, potentially, is that report, is it running in import mode? Is it running in direct query mode? Is it potentially running a certain set of data sources? To just give me more information to build out a dictionary, potentially, about the information that we have. The admin APIs is a specific set of APIs that are really, really crucial for this. They are your friend, because they give you lots of interesting information, especially the crucial $expand parameter. I'll get back to that in a bit as well. And then the thing that is really, really cool is this lineage API. It is an API that can give you the information on everything that you have in Power BI. Because the last few weeks, we've seen some really, really interesting preview features being added as well. The lineage API can, for instance, give us information about the data source details. It can give us information about data lineage. Which data sources is it using? It can give us information about users. What users have direct access, have been manually shared on a report, on a dashboard, on an app, etc. It is really, really becoming the single stop shop of everything that we need to have. The thing is as well is a service principal is the clear road ahead. What do I mean with a service principal? Well, it is a sort of, let's say, service account. A service account that gives you the ability to automate all the processes. The experience for service principals was a bit limited, let's say a year and a half ago. But as time has been progressing, we've seen more and more potentials for using that service principal to actually automatically enable us to run all these different processes. And we're going to be seeing this more and more. And again, I'm referencing a slide by Melissa Coates, who's been doing fabulous work on everything for data culture for Power BI administration as well. And she's laid out a typical Power BI auditing solution. And it is, you don't have to go as deep, as far as Melissa is laying out on this slide as well, because potentially the thing that can already be interesting for you to get started with is get started with that Power BI activity log. Have those activities, know who's been doing what inside of your different, inside of the Power BI tenant. And then as soon as you want to go further in this, start getting that information about workspaces, maybe even about security, who has which privileges in a workspace. And then if you want to go further into this, okay, let's go into group memberships. Let's go into licensing information. Let's go into gateway information. Specifically, try to take one step at a time. Don't go into the office, well, or don't start work on Monday and say, I want to have this solution. Start small. Start with baby steps. Start with one single block at a time. Start expanding on that. Get information and move forward on these things. There are, luckily, these days, there are solutions. There are community scripts out there that can actually give you lots of this information that already exists. I have a few links in the references slide at the end as well, which you can pick up and start working with as well. So to give you an example, of how you can, how effectively, how soon and how quick you can actually go ahead and start with this is I went to the docs page. So docs.microsoft.com and then go to the admin page. So the API references. So you can bing it, go for Power BI REST API, and then you can get started with it. The one that I have open right here is Get Groups as Admin. And this allows me to get an overview of every workspace that I have. So if you don't feel like running PowerShell or writing APIs, you just want to have some quick insights. The thing is that you can also go ahead and say, okay, let's try it. And then it's going to ask you, if you're not signed in, it's going to ask you for, okay, give your credentials. What account do you actually want to run it for? And then you can start working with the parameters that have been added there and say you have to give a top. So you want to get the top 10, you want to give the top 50, whatever. And then what I mentioned with this $expand parameter, this is where it gets really cool, because if I run the basic information, the basic API is going to say, okay, you have this workspace, it is a classic workspace, a V2 workspace, and that's it. As soon as you run this $expand, parameter, it's going to give you all the information that you have there that is relevant to what you're doing. So if I give every single one of these, it's going to give me information about users, reports, dashboards, data sets, about data flows and workbooks. Okay, good. Then I say, all right, let's run this. And then I have the results that I need. It's going to give me all the results that I need and say, okay, I have a workspace, which is test, okay, and where I am an admin on it, and then a service principal I've created is also an admin on it. There's reports in there, and it gives you lots of these informations. And as soon as you start having this information, as soon as you start collecting it, you can start combining those things together, and you can get a really interesting overview to start combining that into the Power BI activity log that I mentioned briefly before as well. The other one that I quickly want to show you is those lineage APIs. They are entirely at the bottom, and they are extremely cool. Let me be quite frank on this. It allows you to get those insights on what you actually need. So what you need to do is post those workspace infos before, but then we have these parameters that you can also start setting. Meaning, do you want to have data source details? Do you want to have the information about users? Which users have access on the app level, on the report level, on the dashboard level, on the dataset level? Do you want to have lineage information? It's going to give you back an incredible amount of details on there. It is a bit harder to get started with. I do want to acknowledge that, but the information that you get from this goes one step further. But as I mentioned, don't dive in too deep from the get-go. Start small. Start looking at that activity log. Start taking those next steps. But then, as time progresses, this is really something that you should be looking at, because this is potentially going to give you lots of interesting information. It could also answer that that who can question. I had this exact question in the past as well, where a CIO comes up to me and says, okay, Benny, I know that we have HR-based data sets in there, and there is information about Bradford factors, about wages, about absences, those things. I want to know who can access that data set. So you think that's an easy question, but with the fact that you can share a report manually, that you can share a dashboard manually, that you can give permissions on a data set directly, people have permissions on workspaces, that was a really hard question to answer, because you had to figure out where exactly everything is. The fact that you can get that information out programmatically is going to make it lots easier to start answering those questions, which is something that I find is, it made my day very well when I saw that coming as well. The thing is, those are just those are catalogs, dictionaries. What is happening? What is happening inside of my tenant? When I'm going to tenant settings, that is about what is actually allowed to start happening in my tenant. And please do go back to what I mentioned in the beginning, that it's not just about switching toggles and switching everything to off, because that's just going to put off people and try to find other solutions. But it does allow certain behavior to be allowed for a certain set of people, etc. And the thing is that I want to give to you as well is a crucial step is make sure that you document these tenant settings. Make sure that you keep a good eye on what has been set. Why am I saying this? Well, potentially, if there is someone else that also does tenant admin stuff, and they make a switch, they make a change, for instance. Do you know what they've changed? Do you know what the previous setting was? And it is something that you need to keep a good eye on, especially if there are some more important tenant settings that potentially can open up crucial behavior. That's something you really want to keep an eye on. Because of the fact that changes are not easily captured. The only thing that you can get through the activity log is saying, hey, there is a tenant admins feature switch that has been changed. But then there is also luckily something that you can set up, but it's a bit farther away, is in the Cloud App Security Center, where you can set up alerts for, okay, this tenant setting has been changed, and this was a previous value, this is the current value. The thing is, most of these tenant settings can be scoped to enable or disable behavior. They can be set to the entire organization or to include or exclude groups. So what's the behavior that you want to have, and what's the behavior that you want to see for this tenant setting? Can everyone use it? Can no one use it? Only certain people can use it. Only certain people can't use it. What's the preferred behavior that you want to see with this? And then the link that I've shared there from by Gilbert Quevillier is super interesting as well, because he makes an overview of what type of security group can you use in which parts of Power BI. And mail-enabled security groups, they work the best. There might not necessarily be what your identity management team is using, but they give you the most application possibilities inside of Power BI as well. The tenant settings that I personally feel that are really important to pay some special attention to is the workspace settings, the export and sharing settings, and the Power BI visuals. But naturally, let me just quickly go over there as well to show you. So I am logged in to PowerBI.com on a tenant from our user group that has little to no activity on this. So it means that I can show pretty much anything that I have on here. So what I want to do is go to my tenant settings. So I click on the ellipsis here and say settings. Okay, let's go to admin portal. As soon as I get to the admin portal, that's where I start seeing those different tenant settings, those things that I've mentioned before. And why do I feel that the workspace settings are crucial? Well, there was a time where every single Teams channel, every single Office 365 group, every single SharePoint page, every single SharePoint site, every single whatever was happening in Office 365 also created a Power BI workspace, which led to, in our organization at the company I work for instance, I am currently a member of like 95 different Power BI workspaces. where I am actually doing something in 4 workspaces, which means that if I need something, if I need to find something, I have to scroll way too much. So we want to limit the workspace creation process potentially. So the thing is as well is, do we want to have those workspaces? Can they be created by everyone, or can they only be created by a specific set of people? So do you want to have every end user to have the ability to create a workspace? Potentially this is good because they can get started really quickly. Potentially this is less than good because you may end up with 7,000 workspaces that no one knows why they exist. It is weighing off the benefits, weighing off the disadvantages, and see what works for your organization and your processes. Then again, this one is for me the crucial one that says block classic workspace creation. And that's the behavior that I've described with those Teams pages, those Teams channels, those Office 365 groups, those SharePoint sites, where we did something in Office 365 and it would trigger a workspace on the Power BI side. As soon as you block this, then that would mean that it will not necessarily automatically create something. But the most important ones, and where it actually gets really fun to do something with, is in those export and sharing settings, because it does allow you to say, okay, what different types of export can it do? Can people export data to Excel? Can they do raw exports of the data to CSVs? Can they export to Word, to XML, etc.? And this is something that, again, you have to see in your organization what works and what doesn't work for your organization. And then, especially the latest one, that's something that I'm well, I have some issues, well, not issues, that I want to be able to understand properly, is the shareable links, meaning that they've made the sharing system the exact same thing as we have in Office 365, where you can just create a link, potentially to open up to everyone in the organization, which can be useful because it would allow people to easily share it with the organization. Because potentially it would also mean that maybe they've overseen something and that they're now sharing the financial results at the end of the quarter to the entire organization. So it is something that needs to be thought about, which needs to be thought through well. And then the last one that I want to highlight, because I don't want to go through the entire admin portal here, is Power BI Visuals. And why am I mentioning Power BI Visuals? The thing is, Power BI has lots of interesting visuals. They have default visuals, which are included. You have those bar charts, column charts, pie charts, line graphs, whatever you want to have. But for some use cases, they're not enough, and you want to use custom visuals. I mean, everyone wants to have those aquarium fishes in their reports all of the times. I understand it. I get it. The thing is, we have to see what we allow. And the point of advice that I usually give to my customers is say, okay, well, just go for those certified visuals only. And what does it mean if it's certified? If you go to the app source or to the Power BI visuals part, it is if they have that little blue check mark next to it. This means that it's been vetted, that it's been approved by Microsoft. Does that mean that everything that goes on the app source isn't approved by Microsoft? It is approved, but to a lesser extent. If it is certified, that means that the visual has gone through a very, very rigorous process of code reviews, of making sure that there is no malicious intent there, etc. If it's uncertified, then hey, potentially there can be something that is not happening, that is not what we want to have, but it does mean that it still has been checked. The thing is, we can go for certified visuals only. Good, excellent. But what's going to happen if someone says, well, okay, but I still want to have that Gantt chart that someone created. I still want to use that. How do I do that? Well, that's when we go to some other part of the organizational portal. That's where we go to something that is called organizational visuals. And organizational visuals allows you, let me just highlight again where it is. So it is in the drop-down list a bit lower. It allows you to create a sort of whitelist of visuals that you want to allow on top of the certified visuals that you have. And you can choose to just upload a file directly or go from app source. The thing is, typically, I'm not too fond of going from a file directly, potentially because it could come from some shady GitHub website that no one has actually checked, or they release a new file every two weeks, and I have to upload that file again every 2 weeks. If we get it from app source, then it's a bit better. The thing is that, okay, I mentioned the certified process, but how do I actually know that this visual is safe? How do I know that it's secure? How do I know that it's okay for my users to start using that with the data? The process that I currently use isn't 100% waterproof, but it's something. What I usually do is I go to a development environment where I know that I'm allowed to break stuff. I open up a Power BI file with that visual, and I start loading in test data, just dummy data, whatever I have lying around. And then I make sure that I also have a Fiddler trace running. Fiddler or any trace that you have that tracks network activity. That's when you can see, okay, what calls is it opening up to other websites? What thing is it doing to start accessing potentially other websites, other parties? Where is it sending my data to? Is it 100% waterproof? No, but it does allow you to fairly quickly see if something shady is happening or not. If for instance, it is leading to a FTP server somewhere in Russia, then maybe that's not the best idea to have your US-based financial data being sent to. So it is a quick process to see if it does something. Most of those visuals that come from the app source, they're quite okay. It is just the fact that you have to check it yourself, because at the end of the day, you're probably going to be the person they talk to if it turns out that there's some form of data leak coming throughout those custom visuals. Right, so we had custom visuals and organizational visuals as well. Let me keep going. The thing is that there is a really important topic as well that I do want to get as well. It is who can access that data. If we have a report, if we have a data set in a workspace, who can access that? And that's where it gets a bit confusing. That's where it can get a bit, that's where it can be a bit, well, less than ideal to follow up, because it can come from so many different places. It can come from the workspace access. Who has direct access on the workspace? Who has access on the app from that workspace? Who has access with the manual sharing from the report, the manual sharing from the dashboard? Who has direct permissions on the data set, build permissions, read permissions? There's so many different things happening that you need to check to see who can access that data. And then it can also be affected by if we have row level security and then object level security, which went into preview in February 2021. So it is so many different details that we can have in our that we have to check out. The thing is that something that you need to keep in mind is that something that I've seen being oversighted far too many times is that if you have someone that is a workspace admin member or contributor, they will have no row level security, no object level security applied. They will not have that applied to them. So they will be able to access everything. They will also have implicit build permissions. So they will be able to build new reports, data sets even, on that data set. Why is this? Well, because of the fact if they have that permission, they would be able to go into the data set, they would be able to download the PBX file themselves and make those changes. So it doesn't make sense to shield them off from it. They will be able to do it. So if you want to have those forms of security applied, you need to make sure that they have viewer permissions on the workspace. And I do mean it when I've seen this being done quite a few times as well. The thing is, if you have certain data sets which you know are really crucial, HR data, financial data, maybe R&D data that is really potentially crucial, that's what you want to want to make sure that there is monitored closely. That's what you maybe even want to check up like every once in a week or so to make sure that there is something good being set in there. And then as well is an admin, either Power BI admin or an Office 365 global admin, can give access to anyone in all new workspaces. So the current workspace experience can give access to themselves, can give access to anyone. They can break into any workspace they want to. Potentially, that's not ideal behavior. If I mentioned those key assets that may not be for everyone's eyes, then you also need to make sure that those people that have admin privileges are not in that list of people that cannot see that data. Those people need to be admins that can see that data potentially, or that have signed NDAs or waivers or whatever. But just make sure that you have people that have admin privileges that you know and trust to do the right thing. And then if I mentioned those, that you have so many different options where people can start accessing the data, go with the lineage API that I've briefly shown, or go with specific APIs for the reports, the apps, the dashboards, the data sets. For instance, get app users as admin. And it is, I know that it's a lot of information, but it is something that is crucial to understand for the what if scenario. Who can access the data? Because if the CIO asks you who has access to data, then that's quite easy, because you can give them the activity log and say, this is the list of people that have done it. But it's the who can question. That is potentially a really interesting and a really hard one that you need to be answering as well. The role the gateway plays is, it's often I've seen this being oversighted as well. The gateway is the application that allows us to transfer on-premises data in a secure way to the Power BI service. That's the function it plays. It allows us to do that data transfer. The thing is, it actually means that any user that has those permissions to publish something will be probably generating traffic on that machine as well. So users that want to be able to publish new data sources, new reports towards a specific data source need to be giving those permissions. The thing is as well is that by default, from the Power Platform side, anyone in the organization can install gateways. They can install personal gateways, they can install on-premises data gateways. Debate for your own organization if it's something that you think is useful or not, but that potentially could mean that you have 572 personal gateways running in the organization, which may not be too ideal, because that potentially could lead to corporate data being opened up to users that shouldn't be accessing that data. So it is from a perspective of security and compliance, it is how far do you want to allow it and how far do you want to shield off some certain parts of data. And I do say on the Power Platform side, by default, it's possible, but it's also the fact that it's managed by who can install software on the laptop, who has privileges to get something from service, some SCCM or those tools. But from a Power Platform side, anyone can do it. The thing is, I want you to debate that policy as well for personal gateways. They are super easy. People can get started. They can do it on their laptop. They can start uploading Excel files and CSVs, etc. But to my personal opinion, they have very little use in an organization. The only reasons I still see for personal gateways is if we're running R or Python in our data sources, because that is not allowed on an enterprise data gateway. But those personal gateways, if it's for experimentational purposes, etc., yes, okay, maybe. But if it's going to be something that we want to have processes running on a daily basis, data connecting to certain servers, etc., then I would prefer to have it on the enterprise side. Because of the fact that if it's a personal gateway and it's running on someone's laptop, if they go away for 3 weeks on a vacation, which they've probably earned very much, then that data will not be able to be refreshed, which could potentially lead to interesting situations as well. And then as well, something that is quite often overseen is the gateway is very important in the refresh performance of your data sets. Again, this is an entire new topic, but query folding or lack thereof has a very big impact. If you're connecting to a SQL server and you're enabling query folding to be run, then that will send a workload to your SQL server. If there is no query folding, then the workload will be put on the gateway server, which potentially you've not been made aware of, that you're running this gateway on a 4 GB box with a slower CPU. And then your data set refreshes are going to be slow, potentially. And that is something that I've seen happening as well, is that the gateway machines weren't properly scaled. That is something really good to keep an eye on as well. But also, if you're seeing very high loads on that gateway machine, then maybe you need to talk to some people to start tuning their data set refreshes. There is lots of things that can be useful to this as well. Luckily, we do have the Power Platform Admin Center, but I am going to skip over that sadly as well for time purposes. That allows you to get an oversight, an overview of which gateways do you have, potentially who's been running it, which data sources you have on there, so lots of information on there. Specifically, I want to touch base as well on premium per user. It's been introduced what was it? Announced September 2020, and then released in November, and it went into GA, I think, in May. And it's really good because it allows a per user basis to do these premium features. Really good because it is for small organizations. It allows them to do those cool, shiny, cool things as well. Why do I think it is less than ideal? Because by default, people can assign themselves an in-product trial experience or a Power BI Pro trial. The thing is that a Power BI Pro trial also gives you the premium per user, which means that they can start making, if they have a workspace, they can self-assign that to a premium per user capacity. They can start building cool data flows on it, AI features, etc. And then their product feature, their product trial experience is expired. Then maybe they want to keep that thing as well, and then they want to. You need to go find those licenses, etc. And potentially they've been building lots of different things. That is, it's something that you may want to keep an eye on as well. How did I start tracking that information? Because it wasn't super easy at start as well. Is tracking down the Power BI activity log and getting the license information. Do they have a license that has been given to you yourself? And then start getting that workspace information as well. It is, I've noted that down in a blog post. That is something that saved me lots of time as soon as I found out how that was, because I did get that exact question. One of the CIOs found out that premium per user was a thing. And we did also see that someone had started building these really cool production grade things on it. But on a preview feature, while the pricing wasn't completely known at that point in time, which meant that I had to find out who was actually using this. And then for monitoring, it is quite simple. That monitoring is, and that title is not correctly, okay, but let's go. Some things that I want you to take a look at, for instance, is setting up those simple alerts. Maybe you have that activity log, you have that it's being connected, you store it somewhere, it is in CSV files for SQL Server maybe. Set up a data alert. Do you want to have a data alert in a dashboard tile for premium per user, for in-product trial experience? Do you want to have that for publish to web? Do you want to have that for custom visuals? It's a really easy way to make sure that you can have some form of alerting without going too deep into setting up complex systems, etc. As soon as you have that activity log, you can start feeding that into a data set and get those dashboard tiles alerts as well. Some possible things that I monitor myself is changes to tenant settings, publish to web, the trial experiences, export data. So if they are exporting data out of there, if they're fiddling about with gateways, if they're deleting stuff, then those are things that I usually want to check up on. Mind you, if it is a tenant that has 3,000, 4,000 people, you cannot check up on everything. But it's those, especially those deletes and those publish to webs, that I really want to be checking as well. Or you can go ahead and build out this really cool wide monitoring solution, but that's something that I cannot cover in 60 minutes time. Mark Lelyveld, who is a Dutch colleague and VP of mine, he does a session, but he also has a really hard time getting it down to 60 minutes as well. So for takeaways, if there is anything I want you to take away with this, it is go for that Power BI activity log. Get that data. Make sure that you can answer those questions about what has happened. Start getting that history. For key areas that are relevant to the organization, to the tenant that you have, start scoping those settings. Scoping, meaning not disabling, but make sure that the people that can use it know what they're doing. Make sure that you have some form of alerting for external failures. Are certain Azure components failing? Is there an alert that's being generated on the Microsoft 365 Health Center? Start alerting for that internal usage, those examples that I've given you, or maybe even something else. And then especially, it is something that I didn't dive into too deep right now, but I'm also seeing a question on this, is go for the data gateways. So start to see what is actually happening on that gateway. But most importantly, as I mentioned in the very beginning, you are a tenant admin. Accidental tenant admin, maybe you're not a tenant admin, but still you are a very important cog in that data culture. Try to stimulate the usage of the tool. Try to make sure that people can actually do something and that they're proud of what they're doing, that they can get those insights, that they can help their own job to further what they've been doing. And then the hard thing is try to keep yourself updated. It is really hard because, as I mentioned, Power BI is a moving target. But there are many different things that you can try to follow along with to stay updated, to stay relevant. Look at the roadmaps, look at the release blogs by Power BI, the Power Platform release waves, and then, well, you have community authors and initiatives. You're here on a Saturday morning or potentially another period of time, which means that you're actively trying to learn something new to help you in your job or potentially at a new job that you're doing. The thing is, if you're reading something on the interwebs, is check for a release date. Because especially with Power BI, if you're reading something that has been published in December 2019, for instance, chances are that it may not be 100% accurate anymore, which can potentially lead to some interesting scenarios. But most importantly is you cannot know it all. There is no shame in Googling or Binging, whatever you want to ask Jeeves, whatever your search engine is. Search something on your search engine. Ask questions. There is no shaming doing that. You cannot know everything. And then again, to close off, one last thing that I do feel is very relevant is that there is no such thing as self-service BI. The thing is that self-service BI, for me personally, is about making sure that people and processes and methodologies in the organization are aligned to each other. The tools come at a second place for me. It is about how you collaborate with people in the organization and how you try to structure the ways of working. If they are intended to work together to stimulate each other, then you will go a lot farther with, for instance, old school Excel files than if you have a shiny new BI tool, but no one's talking to each other. So have that communication, have that open-ication, have that culture in your organization, because that's going to lead you lots farther than just aiming at the technical things. There is a bunch of references that I have in this slide, a bunch of things that I think are really interesting to follow up on as well. And I am going to stop on this specific slide because I did see a question by Gina on this, on how can we analyze and how can we check how much duress a gateway cluster is under, for instance. There is a 5-part series by Luca Zavarella, who is an Italian MVP, and he wrote a 5-part series that does exactly that. He goes through what can you log, what can you check on the gateway, and why are they important to start checking these things. So it is a really interesting one to follow up if you want to go deep inside of the gateway part. The references are in the PowerPoint, and I will also make sure that I can share the slide deck again. That I can share the slide deck again, so you can find that slide. You can get all those. You can get all those links in there as well. That said, I am a bit over time. I hope it was interesting for you. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or I'll also check the Discord page as well to see if there's any questions there. But I think I had Gina's question, and then Kevin said something about, is anyone interested in seeing an overloaded premium capacity that has a model so large it struggles? Yeah. I've seen it as well, Kevin. It's fun to start looking at these things. But I think I had all the questions, which means that we are good to go. So enjoy the coffee break, enjoy the rest of the sessions, enjoy the rest of the days, and let's hope we get to meet each other soon somewhere. Thank you.
Awesome, amazing.